All right, thrilled to have Cooper Conway with us, another Young Voices contributor, friend of ours, Boise State student, bon vivant of the world, Red Sox fan. How are you, sir?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you for having me.
Glad to have you with us. Suffering through a whole bunch of things between my bad voice and my family issues in the home, making lots of noise that we won't get into. You've been writing about somebody who's highly controversial, though. I have very strong opinions about this guy. I have very mixed opinions about this guy. But let me just open the floor to you this way, and you do it. Elon Musk, rich man, innovator. Some people love him. A lot of people don't. What's your thoughts on him?
Yeah, I gotta admit, he's all of the above. He's a mixed bag. I think I don't want to say I'm an Elon Musk fanboy, but I will say that I appreciate what he's doing for my generation and for future generations and what he's trying to accomplish. So in that case, I'll give him a gold star. Some of his tweets I can disagree with and how he carries himself in public life, but that's really up to him personally. So I'd say I'm a fan. I'd say I support him.
Here's my thing. I've broke this down before. I'll bring it to you this way. I love the SpaceX stuff. I'm highly skeptical of the Tesla stuff, which that's a whole nother thing for its own day. I really can't stand how he publicly carries himself with certain things. Let's talk about the cave rescue and that sort of thing. But I also think there's a place in society for the crazy, eccentric genius type person. Society needs those kind of colorful characters in a lot of ways. Am I wrong to kind of balance it out that way, or is that kind of how you see him as well?
I see in a similar way. I think how he carries himself is up to interpretation, depending on very much the values that you hold dear. For myself, there's definitely times where I'm not a huge fan, but also some of his outside of the box thinking, I think, is special, and it's obviously unique to him. He's a unique person, and how he carries himself and what his dreams are. And I think we are lacking right now a place where we can support people that dream and think outside of the box. And I think he does that. And so I think that's a good thing.
Is it just the billionaire thing? You were writing about it in this piece that was published at the American Spectator about Elon Musk. Is it the billionaire thing because billionaire has become such a term and buzzword that just anything that's a billionaire is obviously bad? So even though, and again, I've got plenty of problems with how he conducts himself personally and some other issues as well, I don't think this just blanket hatred for everything that's a billionaire is particularly healthy. And that's something you touched on that you think some of the Musk stuff is as well.
Yeah, I definitely think that's a serious problem. I particularly think that you're right. We just throw this person has this much amount of money in their bank account, and they must be bad. And I particularly don't understand it when it comes to Musk, because I think Musk is the one billionaire that my generation in particular should like the most. He's the one that's trying to fight climate change, and he's going to space. He's trying to get us on Mars. And I get worried when he gets named the Time Magazine's 2021 Person of the Year, and people my age are supporting these senators that are going after him for not paying his fair share of taxes, whatever that may be in your mind, or just think that he's an overall bad guy, when I'm seeing his accomplishments over the past year as exciting. And I personally love space. I love the idea of one day us being able to go to Mars and do commercial space travel. And I think we're thinking very much short term, and that he's taking joy rides and not helping the people out on Earth, when I think these joy rides are going to transform into something much bigger decades down the line.
Yeah, see, that's something that our friend Michael Siegel keeps talking about, pushing back on the billionaires in space thing. Is he's like, hey, wait a minute. He's like, you need that because this is how you gateway this stuff. And you talked about that in your piece, that, yeah, you can just bash it, but if you don't have people opening gateways to things like this, yes, they could maybe use it for selfish ends in the end, but somebody's got to do that. And in the current situation we have, in the current environment we have, this is the way this is going to get done.
Completely. NASA recently released a kind of a report and said that these commercial launch services, they're called, such as Elon's SpaceX, has lowered the cost of reaching low Earth orbit by a factor of 20. And that's a great innovation that he has provided, and that others like Jeff Bezos have really been making serious step towards helping us get into space and to be able to take advantage of whatever it's space. We don't really know a whole bunch about it. Whatever advantages we can take from it, we should.
Yeah, talking to Cooper Conway about Elon Musk. Why do you think this is a generation thing? You nailed your piece towards Gen Z. That's not my generation. I'm either the I don't know, the oldest X or the youngest millennial, depending on which metric you want to use there. Why do you point this towards Generation Z as something that's a generational shift of how people view things like Elon Musk?
I think Elon Musk in particular is because, going back to the billionaire point, is that my generation seems to hold these views of capitalism as an evil. Now it's about 50-50% on whether someone from my generation is going to say capitalism is a good or a bad thing. And this goes for even young Republicans. The party that's supposedly supposed to promote free markets has gone down from to only about 66% of Republicans and GOP leaners my age think that capitalism is a good thing, and I think that we're seeing is a problem as well. He's wealthy and I'm not, and so we're coveting, to make it biblical, not necessarily a good thing, and so he's being attacked for that instead of saying, well, some of his innovations that has made him all of this money is going to end up trickling down, if you put that in quotation marks, to my generation in terms of innovation.
Talking to Cooper Conway. The thing about it is this is beyond just the traditional left-right spectrum. You talk about this in the piece too, is, not to get into too much horseshoe theory here, but this enviousness of wealth, this covetousness, if you want to use that biblical term again, like you alluded to, both sides tend to go that way once you start talking ideology wise, and especially on society thing and economic things. That's just kind of a part of human nature here, and it doesn't really fit neatly into our ideological spectrum. And then you have somebody like an Elon Musk show up, it makes it even messier, doesn't it?
It really does. My former boss at AEI, James Pathakoukas, described Elon Musk's politics as a politics of progress, and something that isn't really shown on either side of the aisle, in terms of more Republicans are starting not to be super comfortable with free trade. Obviously, Bernie Sanders wanting to kind of redistribute wealth across the board here, and having someone like Elon Musk that really thinks of technology as a way to help solve some of our problems and embracing that instead of trying to push away from the idea of innovation and growth, really stands out from the pack.
Talking to Cooper Conway about Elon Musk and technology. Let's take it this direction for just a second. We're talking generation gaps, not to go old guy yelling at clouds for a second, but the fact that Musk is kind of immature in his social media presence. He is abrasive. He does act childish a lot of the times. That's something that turns a lot of people off, turns me off. Is that generational too, or is that something that maybe the younger generation or Gen Z, maybe it's just something where they just view it differently?
Oh, that's a good question. I think that really depends on if you're. There's definitely people my age who I can think of in my friend group that are Elon Musk fanboys. They love everything he does, whether that's calling Senator Elizabeth Warren Senator Karen, and kind of making an attack on her on Twitter, or just kind of, like we were alluding to, some more immature comments. But also that does turn off a lot of people in my generation. So it kind of just is split down the middle in terms of if you like the guy and his personality at all. I personally have my issues as well. But I think I just need to look past that and look at the idea that Tesla alone in 2020 helped the world avoid 5 million metric tons of CO2 emissions. That's an accomplishment that, despite his bad tweets that I may not agree with, I think is something that's more important.
Yeah, we're talking to Cooper Conway, another of the great Young Voices contributors we get to work with. We're going to take a quick break on her tail when we come back. Going to dig a little bit more into Elon Musk, going to talk a little education with him as well. Kind of talk about, since he's into a space, maybe we're not using education to stare at the stars quite as much as we used to be. We'll get into that with Cooper Conway right after this. And we're back with Cooper Conway, another Young Voices contributor, Boise State. That's the blue field for those of you that sports ball. Cooper, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing fantastic.
We were
Boise State is able to get into a bowl game next year, but we'll see.
Didn't they do a bowl on that field one time and like all the birds killed themselves because they were repainting the lines and there was no white and all the birds started like, you know, dive bombing straight into the field because they thought it was water or something crazy. Am I remembering that correct?
That is exactly correct. We don't always like to talk about that as our field killing birds, but yes, that did happen.
Well, on to other matters. One thing we were talking about Elon Musk. You're you're kind of bailiwick on commentating. We've had you on the show before talking about educational issues. Um, I wonder sometimes we used to really praise inventors, even excedrin, that's a headache thing, eccentric ones and crazy ones and ones that aren't maybe socially acceptable. But we used to praise them as part of our education system of like, hey, you should aspire to be an Edison or an inventor or a Washington Carver or any of these guys. We don't do that with Musk. Obviously, he turns a lot of people off. He turns me off. I'm upfront about that. But are we losing a link between education and practical inspiration of people by not putting up people that innovate like this as something to be celebrated?
Yeah, I think it's a real problem of what are we valuing, and it seems that creativity is not one of those things that we are valuing in our K through 12 education system. And I think not many people know this, but Elon Musk actually opened up his own private school for some of his children and then also some of his employees at SpaceX, I believe, called Ad Astra, that specifically kind of targets this and goes from away from the traditional education model, the pep rallies, the sports, and really does it more towards chemistry labs. And who knows, maybe he has some of the kids play around with some of those flamethrowers just to try something new and think outside of the box.
Just for the record, we are not advocating children play with flamethrowers. Just to put that out there. What should we be focusing on K through 12? Because I've been contending, a lot of people other do. Crisis reveals things. I think COVID has revealed a lot of issues with the K through 12 system, and I don't think they're COVID related. I think they've been revealed by COVID. We were 2 years into this. We've gotten most of the schools back open. Obviously, Omicron's kind of threatening that now. Have we learned anything, or is it just plow ahead as it was before? Because we had a lot of parent outrage, we had a lot of teacher outrage, we had a lot of administrative outrage, but I don't really see anything being different even after all that. Do you?
Yes, I think I see a lot of people who are pointing to the past 2 years and saying our K through 12 system has totally collapsed and has failed our students. And I see it as it's been failing our students. This is not anything new. Students need more opportunities and more choice to attend a school that necessarily works best for them. I'm not saying that all public schools are failing every single child that they serve, but I'm saying that not every child is going to be served by a traditional one size fits all model. And I think when it comes to curriculum, a lot of parents are looking for more transparency in terms of what their child is being taught. And over the past, I would say, year or so, particularly, the it's kind of been peeled back, and parents are starting to see, oh, this is what my child is being taught, and they're not necessarily liking it. And so they're trying to get something different out of the school system, and the schools aren't exactly budging.
This is something, not to bring it back to Musk again, but people are complaining like, well, why don't they spend this money on planet Earth? Why are they spending all this money on Earth? Well,
Mm.
education is one of those things we can point to and go, we're spending all the money, that God has on this stuff, and it's not making it any better. But we don't ever seem to put those two arguments together and go like, well, wait a minute, there's a lesson to learn here, but everybody's just talking past it. Do you see that though? That like this is incongruent that we're talking about we'll spend more money. Well, education is one of those things where spending money alone isn't getting it done. So that argument doesn't really wash with me. Where does it with you?
I completely agree. My friend and fellow Young Voices contributor Gary Franklin and I wrote an article recently on Baltimore City's public education system, and we actually pointed towards Musk, and everyone was saying we need to tax him more. And I was saying you could throw every single penny of Elon Musk dollars into the Baltimore City education system, and I would be willing to bet that there's no increase in terms of student achievement. And I think that's because the system itself is broken. The dollars aren't actually reaching the students, and the students aren't seeing that in their lives. The dollars are instead spent on um, administrative staff or just other terms of funding that isn't necessarily helpful for students being able to achieve.
Yeah, and one thing I've found interesting doing some media stuff is things like school choice really don't cut along the normal ideological lines. I know down in our way a little bit, You have some really super progressive people on things like the environment, but they got interested in school choice because of COVID. You have some people that are really against school choice, but they're very, very conservative in a lot of their other ways. This is one of those issues when it comes to education. You start talking people's kids. I think we try to put ideological and political labels on this stuff, but when you start talking people's kids, I don't think it fits into that conversation nice and neatly. Is that something we haven't done a real good job talking here? Is we just need to understand that when we're talking education, this is a whole different conversation that we maybe need to change our terminology and buzzwords on just a little bit.
I think that's fair, but I also would like to point out, I mean, school choice is wildly, like you were saying, it is wildly popular across the board. There definitely are some people on the right, you could say, that aren't exactly huge fans, and some of those on the left that are more progressive. But generally, we're seeing. I know education savings accounts, for example, among parents have 84% support, which is just wildly high levels, and it is something that, in terms of progressives particularly like it, because you're saying, okay, we're going to give usually lower income families dollars directly so that they can serve, and they can attend these private schools that have been in many ways been consistently outperforming some of these more local government schools that these children have been zoned to, and vice versa. You're definitely getting some types of protectionism from wealthier families who don't want their schools to potentially get hurt by these, lower income families. They just like them the way they are. They don't want to change them at all. But really, I think school choice is something where we should be providing opportunities for every
And
single child, no matter the background.
yep, and to loop this back to Elon Musk, we talk about him being this kind of renegade, eccentric genius. He went to the University of Pennsylvania, alma mater of our former President Trump, by the way. Take that for what that's worth. That is an Ivy League school. I really wonder, one thing I wonder about our education system, though, is when we get somebody who is an outside of the box thinker like this, I don't know that the funnel system of K through 12 education, which is so dependent on get everybody possible into the college and higher education system as quickly as possible. I really wonder we're leaving kids behind that need a different path. And I think we're seeing some things like, they're starting to teach coding, they're starting to teach, online skills. There's been a cry for jobs programs to come back into schools, hybrid learning where a lot of kids can go to high school and go to community college at the same time. Do you see that trend continuing? Because I wonder with people like Musk, shouldn't we use that model and be like, hey, we need more people like this. So we better have a wider brush with our education system to give them opportunities to grow and come out of this system.
Yeah, I completely agree. The more diversity that we can bring into the education sphere so that every child has a chance to develop their skills is important. But I also fear we're already seeing in New York, for example, advanced or accelerated learning programs that would serve children like an Elon Musk, who's just naturally and talented and gifted. They aren't getting the chances to go take those higher level math classes because parents are nervous about equity and saying, well, certain kids are getting ahead of my child, and that's not fair. And so they have to, instead of trying to improve their child, higher gifted children are basically being brought down to a certain level, and we're not developing their gifts.
Yeah, I think with when it comes to education, if you're one of those people like us that want to advocate for freedom and liberty, I think it needs to be more all of the above than, pick one or two and like a lot of things in life. Cooper Conway, great talk on this sort of thing. Let folks know where you're at, where they can find you on social media and what you got coming up, my friend, once you get done with your little break you're taking there.
Yeah, you can follow me at Cooper Conway 1 on Twitter, and then you can see my face on the Young Voices profile page on the web.
Yep, he's a C, I'm an A. He's the line right below mine on the Young Voices page. Cooper Conway, we'll keep having you back as education is probably going to be a big issue. Election year, so we're going to be talking education, no doubt. You do well, my friend. Appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much. Hope you feel better.
Thank you.